The security guard's flashlight swept across my face at 2:17 inches the morning. I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at the cracked screen of my old flip phone, wondering if this would be the night my heart finally gave out. August in Tucson, Arizona is brutal. Even at 2 a.m., the temperature was still hovering around 94 degrees. I had all four windows of my 2006 Ford F-150 rolled down, but the air felt like breathing through a wet blanket. "Sir, you can't sleep here. This is private property." I sat up slowly, my back screaming from another night, curled up on a bench seat that was never designed for a 63-year-old man with two bad knees and a herniated disc. The guard was young, maybe 25, with the kind of expression people get when they're not sure if they're looking at a drunk, a criminal, or just another piece of human wreckage that America had forgotten about. "I need to see some ID. My name is Harold James Mitchell. 41 years ago, I founded Mitchell and Davidson Engineering Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona. At our peak, we had 340 employees, contracts with Boeing, Raytheon, and 3 different branches of the United States military. My net worth crossed $14 million on my 58th birthday. I remember because my wife threw me a surprise party at the Phoenician Resort, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. Now I was 63, sleeping in a Walmart parking lot in Tucson with $23 in my pocket, a quarter tank of gas, and nowhere left to go. I handed over my license with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, from hunger. I hadn't eaten anything except a gas station hot dog in 3 days. The guard looked at my ID, looked at me, and his expression softened just a fraction. "Look, I'm not trying to make your life harder, but my supervisor does rounds at 3. If he finds you here, he'll call the cops. I understand. I'll move." I reached for my keys, but the guard held up his hand. "There's a rest stop about 15 miles south on I-10. Nobody bothers people there. And there's a shelter downtown. Opens at 7 a.m. They serve breakfast. I'd been to that shelter once. The smell of desperation and cheap disinfectant had reminded me too much of what I'd become. But I thanked him anyway, because kindness from strangers was the only kindness I received anymore. I drove to the rest stop with my fuel gauge hovering just above empty, found a spot under a broken light where no one would notice me, and tried to sleep. This was my life now. The bottom. The absolute lowest point a person could reach without actually dying. Or so I thought. 5 days later, everything changed. But to understand why, you need to know how a man goes from $14 million to sleeping in his truck in 18 months. It starts with trust. It always does. I met Robert Davidson in 1982 at an engineering conference in San Diego. We were both young, both hungry, both convinced we could build something better than what anyone else was offering. Robert was brilliant. I don't say that lightly. The man could look at a mechanical problem and see solutions that would take other engineers weeks to develop. He had the vision. I had the business sense. Together, we were unstoppable. We founded Mitchell and Davidson in 1983 with $50,000 we'd scraped together from savings, family loans, and one very understanding banker who believed in 2 kids with a dream. By 1990, we'd paid back every cent and were landing contracts that made our competitors nervous. By 2000, we were one of the top defense engineering firms in the Southwest. Robert handled the technical side. I handled the money, the clients, the contracts. We trusted each other completely. For 35 years, I never once questioned that trust. I should have. The signs were there. The same signs that everyone misses until it's too late. Unexplained expenses that Robert always had a reason for. Meetings with clients that I wasn't invited to. A growing distance between us that I attributed to age and stress and the natural drift that happens in any long partnership. And then there was my wife. Margaret and I had been married for 38 years. High school sweethearts from Flagstaff who'd built a life together through all the ups and downs that 4 decades can bring. 3 kids, now grown with families of their own. A house in Scottsdale that we'd designed together, with a view of Camelback Mountain that never got old. I thought we were happy. I thought we had the kind of marriage that other people envied. But here's what I've learned about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It grows in the shadows, fed by secrets and lies, until one day it steps into the light and destroys everything you thought you knew. I found out on March 15th, 2023. The Ides of March. Sometimes life has a sick sense of humor. I came home early from a business trip to San Antonio. The client meeting had been canceled, and I wanted to surprise Margaret with dinner at her favorite restaurant. Instead, I found Robert's car in my driveway. I found his shoes by my front door. I found him in my bedroom, with my wife, in a situation that required no explanation. The confrontation was ugly. 38 years of marriage, 35 years of partnership, all of it unraveling in a single afternoon of screaming and tears and truths that should have stayed buried. It had been going on for 7 years. 7 years of lies. 7 years of secret hotel rooms and fabricated business trips and looking me in the eye while they planned how to take everything I'd built. Because that's what they'd been doing. Planning. Robert had been siphoning money from the company for almost a decade. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. He'd created a network of shell companies, fake vendors, invoices for services never rendered. By the time I discovered the affair, he'd already stolen almost $8 million, and Margaret had helped him hide it. She'd been his accountant's assistant before we met. She knew how to make numbers disappear. I confronted them both that night. Robert didn't even try to deny it. He just smiled, that smile I'd seen 1,000 times in boardrooms and negotiations, the smile of a man who always had an angle. "Harold," he said, "be reasonable. You're 62 years old. You've got maybe 15, 20 good years left if you're lucky. Why spend them fighting? I'll buy out your share of the company. Fair market value. You walk away with enough to retire comfortably, and we all move on with our lives. You stole from me. You slept with my wife. And you want me to be reasonable? I'm offering you a way out. The alternative is lawyers, courts, years of litigation that will drain every penny you have left." He put his arm around Margaret. She wouldn't look at me. "We both know how these things end, Harold. The lawyers always win. Everyone else loses. I should have fought. I should have hired the best attorneys in Arizona, documented every stolen dollar, protected what was rightfully mine." But I was in shock. Complete, paralyzing shock. The two people I'd trusted most in the world had been betraying me for nearly a decade, and I couldn't process it. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't do anything except feel the ground crumbling beneath my feet. Robert and his lawyers moved fast. Within 6 weeks, I'd been forced out of my own company through a series of legal maneuvers I still don't fully understand. Something about fiduciary responsibility and protecting shareholder interests and a bunch of other terms that essentially meant Robert had covered his tracks well enough that proving the theft would take years and millions of dollars I know longer had. The divorce was worse. Arizona is a community property state, but Margaret's lawyers argued that most of my assets had been obtained through fraud that she claimed to have just discovered, fraud that she was willing to testify about in exchange for a favorable settlement. My own wife turned state's witness against me to protect herself and her lover. The final settlement left me with $180,000 and an old Ford truck that Robert had deemed not worth fighting over. Our house went to Margaret. The retirement accounts were frozen pending investigation. Everything I'd spent 40 years building was gone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Robert said to me outside the courthouse after the final hearing. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my truck was worth. His hair was perfect. His smile was the same one I'd trusted for 35 years, now revealed for what it had always been. The smile of a predator who'd been playing the long game. "No hard feelings, Harold," he said, extending his hand like we'd just finished a friendly round of golf. "It's just business. You were always too trusting. That's not a bad quality, really. It just makes you easy to take advantage of." I didn't shake his hand. "You destroyed my life. You destroyed our friendship, our partnership, everything we built together. I optimized my outcome. There's a difference." Margaret appeared at his side, wearing jewelry I'd never seen before. Expensive jewelry. She didn't look at me. "We should go, Bobby. I don't want to be late for the reservation. Bobby." She'd never called him that in 35 years. At least not when I was around. Robert turned to leave, then paused and looked back at me with something that might have been pity if it wasn't so clearly contempt. "Take care of yourself, Harold. Although I should warn you." He leaned closer. "Men our age don't recover from something like this. You'll spend whatever time you have left bitter and broken and alone." He straightened his tie. "But at least you'll have your principles." They walked away together. My wife of 38 years and my partner of 35, arm in arm, leaving me standing on the courthouse steps with nothing but a check for less than I'd made in a single quarter 30 years ago. Robert was right, of course. About the bitter and broken part, anyway. The $180,000 lasted 11 months. Lawyers I'd hired to try to recover some of what Robert had stolen. Medical bills from a stress-induced heart episode that put me in the hospital for 3 days. Living expenses that seemed reasonable until I realized I had no income to replace what I was spending. The money ran out in February 2024. By April, I was living in my truck. By August, I was parked in rest stops and Walmart lots, rationing gas and food, wondering if my former partner's prediction was about to come true. And then, 5 days after that security guard sent me away, something happened that I still can't fully explain. I'd pulled into a gas station outside of Phoenix to use the restroom and fill my water bottles from the sink. When I came out, there was a woman standing next to my truck. She was maybe 50, well-dressed, with the kind of professional appearance that made me instinctively check if my shirt was tucked in. "Mr. Mitchell? Harold Mitchell?" I tensed. In my experience, strangers who knew your name usually wanted something you couldn't afford to give. "Who's asking?" "My name is Victoria Santos. I'm an attorney with Patterson, Santos, and Webb in Chicago." She handed me a business card. "I've been looking for you for almost 3 months." "Looking for me? Why?" She glanced around the gas station parking lot, at my truck with its cracked windshield and mismatched tires, at the obvious signs of a man living in his vehicle. "Mr. Mitchell, is there somewhere private we can talk? A restaurant, perhaps? I can buy you lunch. I haven't had anything to be ashamed of for a long time." Shame is a luxury for people who still have something to lose. So I just told her the truth. "Ma'am, I've got $11 to my name and nowhere to be. Say whatever you need to say." She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded, like she'd made a decision. "Mr. Mitchell, do you remember a man named Thomas Reeves?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Thomas Reeves. I hadn't thought about him in decades. 1994. A young engineer, fresh out of Arizona State, brilliant but struggling. He'd come to me with an idea for a new type of hydraulic system, something revolutionary, but he couldn't afford to patent it or develop it. I'd given him a loan. Not from the company, from my own pocket. $15,000 to file the patents and build a prototype. Everyone told me I was crazy. Robert especially. "The kid's a dreamer," he'd said. "You'll never see that money again." But something about Thomas reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry? Determined. Just needing one person to believe in him. I told him to pay me back when he could. He left Arizona a few months later, and I never heard from him again. I figured Robert had been right. The money was gone, and the kid had failed. I was wrong. "Mr. Mitchell," Victoria Santos said, "Thomas Reeves spent the next 20 years developing that hydraulic system. He struggled for most of it. Came close to giving up more times than he could count. But 6 years ago, his technology was acquired by General Dynamics for $340 million. Thomas Reeves is now one of the most successful engineering entrepreneurs in the country." I stared at her. "That's wonderful. Good for him. But I don't understand what that has to do with me." She smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, Thomas Reeves has been trying to find you for almost 5 years. He wants to repay the $15,000 you gave him in 1994. $15,000. It wouldn't solve all my problems, but it would help. It would at least get me into an apartment, maybe give me enough breathing room to figure out my next move. But you didn't have to track me down in person for that. You could have just mailed a check. That's the thing, Mr. Mitchell. Victoria Santos reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thomas doesn't want to repay you $15,000. He wants to repay you what he considers the true value of your investment, the amount your belief in him was actually worth. She opened the folder and showed me a single sheet of paper. I looked at the number printed at the bottom. The gas station parking lot started to spin. $34 million, Mr. Mitchell. That's what Thomas Reeves believes he owes you. He set up a trust, fully funded, with you as the sole beneficiary. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. $34 million. I was sleeping in my truck this morning. I had $11 to my name. And now a woman I'd never met was telling me that a man I'd helped 30 years ago wanted to give me $34 million. There's more, Victoria said. Thomas also wants to meet with you. He flew into Phoenix this morning. He's been waiting at the Biltmore for 3 days, hoping I'd find you. She paused. He said to tell you something specific. He said to tell you that he never forgot. That every day for 30 years, he's remembered the man who believed in him when no one else would. He said he's spent 5 years trying to find you because paying you back isn't about the money, it's about honoring the debt. Tears were running down my face. I didn't try to hide them. I'd spent 18 months being told I was worthless, a failure, a man whose best years were behind him. And now I was being told that a single act of kindness 3 decades ago had been remembered and valued and was about to change everything. Victoria drove me to the Arizona Biltmore. Thomas Reeves was waiting in the lobby. He was 54 years old now, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've earned everything you have. He saw me come through the door and his face crumpled. Then he was crossing the lobby, and he was hugging me like I was his long-lost father, and we were both crying in the middle of a 5-star resort while wealthy guests pretended not to stare. I never gave up, he whispered. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about you. About the man who believed in a kid with nothing but a dream. You saved my life, Mr. Mitchell. Now let me help save yours. We talked for hours. I told him everything. Robert. Margaret. The betrayal, the theft, the divorce, how I'd gone from $14 million to homeless in less than 2 years. How the 2 people I'd trusted most had conspired to destroy me and had almost succeeded. Thomas listened without interrupting. When I finished, his expression had changed. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something that looked like determination. Mr. Mitchell, he said slowly, I have resources now, significant resources, and I have friends in positions that might be useful. Would you be willing to let me look into your former partner's activities? Not for revenge, for justice. There's a difference. He smiled. I learned that from you, actually. 1,994. You told me that honest success was the only kind worth having. I believed you then. I still believe it now. Robert Davidson thought he'd gotten away with everything. He had no idea what was coming. The investigation took 4 months. Thomas hired a team of forensic accountants, former FBI financial crimes specialists, people who knew exactly where to look and what to look for. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Robert hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been running the same scheme for almost 20 years, siphoning money into overseas accounts, defrauding clients, bribing inspectors to approve substandard work. 3 separate government contracts had been compromised. Military equipment that was supposed to meet specific safety standards had been built with cheaper materials while Robert pocketed the difference. People could have died. Maybe people had died. I don't know. What I do know is that the FBI was very interested when they received an anonymous package containing 12 years of documentation, bank records, and testimony from former employees who'd been afraid to come forward until they knew someone powerful was on their side. The indictment came down in March 2025. 18 counts of fraud. 4 counts of bribery, 2 counts of conspiracy to endanger public safety. Robert Davidson was arrested at his home in Scottsdale at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I know because I was watching from a car parked across the street. I needed to see it. Needed to watch them put handcuffs on the man who'd destroyed my life and told me I'd die bitter and alone. Margaret wasn't arrested. Not then, anyway. But a week later, she was served with papers. Thomas's lawyers had found evidence that she'd been a knowing participant in the fraud, not just an innocent bystander as she'd claimed during our divorce. Her immunity deal was void. The money she'd received in our settlement was frozen pending investigation. She tried to reach out to me once, sent a letter through my new lawyers, apologizing, explaining, begging me to help her avoid prosecution. I didn't respond. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. The trial was in October. Robert's lawyers tried every trick in the book, but the evidence was overwhelming. Thomas's investigators had been thorough, very thorough. Robert was convicted on 16 of 18 counts. The sentencing came down in December. I was in the gallery when the judge delivered it. Robert looked at me once, just before they read the verdict. His eyes were empty. No charm left, no angles, no confident smile. Just the hollow stare of a man who'd finally run out of plays. 27 years. Robert Davidson was 65 years old. He would be 92 when he got out, if he made it that long. As they led him away in handcuffs, I stood up. He turned, and our eyes met one last time. I didn't say anything. Didn't gloat. Didn't need to. He told me I would spend my remaining years bitter and broken and alone. Instead, I was standing in that courtroom as a multimillionaire, with the loyal friendship of a man I'd helped 30 years ago, watching my betrayer be led off to spend the rest of his life in prison. The debt had been repaid, in more ways than one. That was 2 years ago. I'm 65 now, living in a modest house in Sedona with a view of the red rocks that takes my breath away every morning. Not a mansion, not what $34 million could buy. Just a comfortable home for a man who's learned that money isn't what matters. Thomas and I are business partners again. We started a foundation that provides startup funding to young engineers who have brilliant ideas but no resources to develop them. We call it Second Chance Engineering. Last year, we helped 47 inventors file patents and build prototypes. Some of them will fail. That's how it works. But some of them won't. And maybe 30 years from now, one of them will remember the old man who believed in them when no one else did. I still have my old Ford F-150. It's in the garage, next to the new truck I bought myself as a birthday present. I could have gotten rid of it, probably should have, but I keep it anyway. It reminds me of who I was before all this, who I still am. Underneath the restored bank accounts and the foundation and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. A man who lost everything. A man who survived anyway. A man who learned that your life can change completely in a single moment. And the only thing you can control is how you respond. People ask me sometimes if I believe in karma. I think about Thomas Reeves, a young engineer I helped once and then forgot about, spending 30 years building something extraordinary and then spending 5 more years tracking me down to repay a debt I never expected to collect. I think about Robert Davidson, so confident in his own cleverness, so certain he'd gotten away with everything, now sitting in a federal prison cell with 27 years ahead of him. I think about Margaret, who chose betrayal over loyalty and lost everything as a result. What are the odds of all this happening? 1,000,000 to 1? 1,000,000,000 to 1? I don't know if that's karma or luck or divine intervention or just the universe's way of balancing the scales. What I know is this. Even when I was sleeping in my truck, even when I had $11 to my name, even when the man who stole my life told me I'd die broken and alone, I kept going. Not because I knew something better was coming, but because giving up wasn't an option. The interesting thing about hitting bottom is that it shows you what you're made of. Some people shatter, some people survive, and some people use it as a foundation to build something stronger than what they lost. Robert Davidson thought he knew me. Thought I was just a trusting fool who could be used and discarded. He was wrong about a lot of things, but he was most wrong about that. I wasn't weak because I trusted people. Trusting people was my greatest strength. It's what made Thomas Reeves remember me after 30 years. It's what made him spend 5 years and considerable resources tracking down the man who'd given him a chance when no one else would. The world tells us that nice guys finish last, that trust is for suckers, that the only way to succeed is to be ruthless and suspicious and always looking for the angle. But I'm living proof that's not true. I succeeded by believing in people. I lost everything because one person violated that belief. And then I got it all back because another person honored it. The math works out in the end. It just takes longer than we'd like. So, here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Have you ever believed in someone when everyone else had given up on them? Or, on the other side, has someone ever believed in you when you needed it most? What did that mean to you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who's going through the worst time of their life right now, someone who feels like everything is lost, like the people they trusted have betrayed them, like there's no way forward, share this with them. Because here's what I've learned. The acts of kindness we scatter throughout our lives don't disappear. They plant seeds we can't see, in soil we'll never visit, that grow into trees we'll never sit under. Until one day, unexpectedly, impossibly, one of those trees provides exactly the shade we need. Thomas Reeves was a seed I planted in 1994 and forgot about. 30 years later, that seed saved my life. You never know which kindness will come back to you. Which act of trust will be remembered. Which person you help today will become the person who helps you tomorrow. So keep planting, keep trusting, keep believing in people, even when the world tells you not to. Because the alternative isn't wisdom, it's just loneliness with a different name. Robert Davidson is in prison. Margaret lost everything. And I'm sitting on my porch in Sedona, watching the sunset paint the red rocks gold, knowing that the best years of my life aren't behind me. They're right now. Stay kind. Stay patient. Keep going. And wait for the knock on your door. You never know who might be standing there, ready to repay a debt you forgot you were owed.